You know, this is a special day. There's 63 Medal of Honor recipients in our country, and I'm proud to say I know every single one of them. And I knew every one of those on the wall here. But it's such a small group that it's hard to reach the entire country to tell us what privilege it is for us to be able to serve for this country and to make a difference, not just on the battlefield, but in the lives of those that we saved. Because in the Medal of Honor, it's important to remember that it's for rescuing or saving lives rather than taking lives. Unfortunately, in battle, or fortunately in the case of the situation, you take lives to accomplish your mission. But the Medal of Honor allows us to put a face on those veterans that did so much that aren't able to express themselves because they didn't survive or there were no witnesses. So it's a special day for us. They're in Washington, D.C. right now, but I personally believe that the value of the Medal of Honor recipients, because it's so community-oriented, that we spend our time in our communities to make it personal, because it is very personal when you are able to share the experiences on the battlefield with our young men and women. So, Brad, I want to thank you for this friendship we've had. The center is a beautiful place that allows us to launch this mission to reach our young people.
Yes, sir. In preparation for today, I've been revisiting the film we made. Really been enjoying it, watching it, and I watched all the pieces. I told Drew the other day that I kind of enjoyed looking at all the stories again and having those memories come back. My son Joe, who works for us, and Tyler Lundquist, who you all know, his recent state championship East High wrestling coach, by the way, just put a plug in for that. Tyler and Joe helped me prepare for today's presentation. What we've done is we can't show you the whole film because it's a long film, and we don't want to bore you too much. But we took several excerpts of the film, and that Drew and I can talk about and give you some behind the scenes on this. And you know, basically, Beyond the Medal was born 26 years ago in 2000. There was a convention of the Medal of Honor going to happen in Pueblo. That the statues that we know down the street there were being created and unveiled. There's the Stewarts are here with us today. They were instrumental in that project, and they hired my company to document kind of the not make a documentary, but document the convention. And so I got involved, and Pete Lemon, who's a Medal of Honor recipient from right now in Colorado Springs, he's a Canadian actually, but Pete Lemon was the liaison for the Medal of Honor Society to the convention. And Paulette, you could correct me if I mess this up, but I think I'm getting it kind of right. But Pete was the liaison, and Pete came to me. I knew him from some other work I was doing with him, and said, hey, we should make a documentary on those four guys. And that's what started this journey that I've been on for 26 years. So we started in 2000. Early on, we lost Bill Crawford. He died in early 2000. And then right behind him, a few weeks later, a month later, Carl Sitter died. And we had started working on the project, and Jerry Murphy and Drew Dix were on board. They were still alive. And the convention was in September of 2000. And from basically the beginning of 2000 to 2004, we worked on the film, and the film was aired on national PBS in 2004, and on Veterans Day 2004. So the first clip I'm going to show, Drew doesn't know any of this presentation, so we're just going to kind of wing it up here. But the first clip I'm going to show is the intro to the film, and then we can kind of talk about that a little bit.
There are two tangible symbols of selfless sacrifice. there are two symbols representing the ultimate offer of one's life for others. One of those symbols is the cross of Christ, and the other is the Congressional Medal of Honor.
The Congressional Medal of Honor is awarded for conspicuous gallantry above and beyond the call of duty. It is presented in the name of the Congress, bestowed upon its recipients by the President of the United States. This is Beyond the Medal of Honor.
No single generation of Americans has been spared the task of going to war. Whenever freedom has been threatened, an army of citizen soldiers has risen to its defense. Clerks, steelworkers, lawyers, farmers, doctors, men and women, young and old, have put on the military uniform to protect our freedom. From their ranks, legends were born. It was Gettysburg, the Chosin Reservoir, Iwo Jima, Khe Sanh. Their tales of courage, sacrifice, and selflessness so incredible they cannot help but inspire us as Americans. Most of them died in battle. A few remain with us today. These true accounts tell a story of ordinary men who, during the darkest hours of human conflict, performed deeds so unbelievable they have been called hero. That title, hero, is symbolized by a 5-pointed star, simple in design but unmistakable in what it represents. It hangs from the blue silk ribbon with 13 stars and is recognized as our nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor. One must look beyond the medal into the eyes of the men who wear it, into their heart, into their soul, and those they touch to fully understand the word hero.
I don't like to consider myself a hero, but it's a title only. You know, I don't know that I did anything all that spectacular. I really don't.
I just think it's something inside that I will have to say is a creator, is our spirit. And what makes that spirit or that person do things, the only way I could say is it probably would have to be training, going way back to your birth.
Every person has fear. The courage is the coming out that you can overcome your fear and carry out the instructions or the duties that you're supposed to do.
The most dramatic thing, I think, when I had this guy's head in my sight, that was the most dramatic thing. But it didn't bother me to throw hand grenades and fire at them, but just to shoot at someone right without him looking at you was, it was a heck of a feeling. It's hard to describe, or something like that.
In the foothills of Colorado's Rocky Mountains sits the town of Pueblo, Colorado, a small town where these four heroes were raised. Today, the city is known as the home of heroes, and together they stand forever, immortalized in bronze. These are their stories.
All right, so that was the intro to the film. Probably the longest clip we'll show you today. So, Drew, do you remember the beginnings of this? I mean, what comes back to mind?
And You know, what I recall is sitting in that hot sun for about 2 hours, wondering if I had a dermatologist around that's going to make all the repairs when I interviewed for this piece.
Well, you remember, I only asked you one question. All I asked him was, so tell us what happened. And he talked for like 7 hours.
Well, actually, you know, I had just completed a book. And the request to write the book is another story, but I did. And I wrote it chronologically, and I had just finished it. And it was fresh in my mind. And what I did is I pretty much recited that book right back to that young man right there. And he was pretty young in those days.
Yeah, I was 30. I was 30. You know, when you watch that scene, there's a lot of things going on. The Paul Harvey piece there, that was actually recorded at the 2000 convention. He came out and he was one of the honorees that was receiving an award, and those were his remarks at the live event. And of course, for the documentary, I was able to kind of stretch it out a little bit and make it a little more dramatic. But those were recorded live. That audio was recorded live. He had it on his radio program. And if you don't know who Paul Harvey is, he was a famous broadcaster and nationally, and took a liking to Pueblo. But so we put that piece of audio, and the funeral that you see. The backstory on that is we went to Arlington Cemetery to film Carl Sitter's funeral. And that was Carl Sitter's funeral. But the kind of the humorous story is my buddy at the time that was working with me, John Shimus, who worked for me, and he was former Army. And he was the one that all along was saying, hey, do you know what the Medal of Honor is? Because I didn't really know. And he was always kicking me in the back, going, hey, these guys are Medal of Honor recipients, you know, and so he would keep reminding me how important this job was that we were doing, which put a little pressure. But we went to Arlington and filmed the funeral, but the caisson was going down and around, and they were taking the casket, and the scene where you see the 21 gun salute, I sprinted through Arlington with the camera, and that was back in the days when the cameras were huge and the tripod, and I ran with that camera, and I was hurdling, probably don't need to say this, but I was hurdling those graves, and I was jumping over stuff, and I got down there, and it started raining, and I slapped that tripod down, boom, and that shot with that 21 gun salute was the shot that literally happened 2 seconds after I slapped the tripod down. It was completely level, was perfect, and it ended up being a great shot to open the film. But it was a complete fluke to get the shot. Yeah. So that's I always watch that scene and think, man, what a fluke that was. But it was great, and it was one of my favorite scenes in the film. The other part of that opening was Tom Brokaw. You guys see Tom Brokaw, the national commentator. He was on NBC News for years. Pete Lemon was able to secure Tom to do the intro for the film. And Doug Sterner, Pueblo Doug Sterner, who has homoheroes.com and was instrumental in the initial recognition of that, hey, there's four Medal of Honor recipients from Pueblo, and kind of got Bob Rawlings thinking about it. And then obviously that's a whole nother story for another time. But Doug, who's a historian, wrote the copy that Tom Brokaw read. And that was written specifically for the documentary, and we didn't pay any fees for that or anything. So that was kind of a interesting tidbit during that time. Hey, can you take it back one slide? Because I was using those notes. No, they're in here too. Never mind, Tyler. And you didn't do anything anyway, so it doesn't matter. Sorry, guys. Yeah, you're fine. Talked about Pete. Oh, the other thing I want to talk about was the voiceover. That's Frank Provenza. So my current business partner is Frank Provenza. You guys know him. We got Mike Salardino in the audience here. He's a KDZA guy. So Frank's way back in the radio days from KDZA. people know who he is, but Frank ended up, he was our writer on the project, and he did the voiceover. And when I was listening, I called Frank this morning and I said, man, what great work you did, because his voice sounds amazing in the film. And I remember when we first started, and I know Frank's online right now watching this because he can't seem to get to the office anymore, but Frank, we need you here. But anyway, Frank did the voiceover, and he did all the writing, and he wrote, and he was nominated for an Emmy for his writing on the project as well. But just a stellar performance by him, and I couldn't have put this together without his insight and his brain power on the project. So thank you, Frank. All right, so next slide. Sorry, guys. I'm not good with PowerPoint, but oh, go back one. Forget that one. Sorry. Okay, so this slide here, there's the usual suspects. So that's Pete Lemon in the top over there, and Pete was the Medal of Honor recipient who put this together. I think Pete's watching from Arizona today. He was going to be here with us, but he's down playing golf in Arizona, so he had more important things to do on Medal of Honor Day than hang out with Drew and I. But Pete, if you're listening, we love you and we wish you were here. But Pete kind of made this whole thing come together and was one of our executive producers. Drew, of course, everybody knows Drew. This was a premiere in Pueblo that we had at the convention center, and Ross Perot. So, and we'll get off of this boring stuff, but some other backstory on the film was, so when Pete said, hey, let's make a documentary on those 4 guys, and I said, okay, we had a little problem. We didn't have any money to make a documentary, especially a 4-hour documentary. But I had a couple of partners, Dan DeRose and Rudy Padula. So some of these names that you see floating around this Center for American Values, you kind of start seeing a theme of where we've ended up, 26 years later. But Dan and Rudy wrote the checks initially for our production, and I was kind of doing some filming. We flew back to DC early on, filmed the funeral, and we started doing things, filmed Bill's funeral at the Air Force Academy. And we were shooting, and probably about in 2002, Dan DeRose came to my office and he said, hey, what are you doing? Like, where are we going with this? Because we didn't know what it meant to make a documentary. And so I said, we're good, we're gonna finish. I showed him the tapes on the shelf. I said, look, I've got all these tapes. And so we had all these tapes and things, and so we stayed the course. Well, Pete had put out a proposal package to Ross Perot. You guys all know Ross Perot from back in the presidential running days. He was a third-party candidate between Bush and Clinton, I believe. But Perot found this proposal we put out, and he liked it. And he came through and he underwrote the entire PBS production that we were putting together for PBS, and the creation and fulfillment of 17,000 DVDs to be put in every high school in America with curriculum. And I'm going to take a little bit of time here. There's 2 of the teachers that wrote that curriculum in this audience today. Mark Sims, stand up, Mark. Mark Sims, there's Mark. Give Mark a round of applause. Mark still uses it today in his class, his 5th grade class, or you teach 5th grade, yeah. And Sarah Pecoraro in the back. That's John's wife, by the way. She gets out of the house more than John does. Stand up, Sarah. Sarah got a bad seat. I don't know who got your tickets, but John must have got your tickets last minute. Anyway, they were, again, you see a theme here. Pueblo people working on this project. Pueblo people coming together, and that's kind of, as it dovetails later into everything you see, is that we used a lot of Puebloans during this project, and people we trust, people we know. But yeah, sorry, I did a lot of talking, Drew. You got anything about any of that stuff?
You were telling me that you asked me one question and you would talk for hours. Well, anyway.
Well, there's no sun, so I'm good.
No, I think I want to emphasize the teamwork. And that teamwork paid off. Brad, his family, and the team that he put together, and Frank. Pete he really should be here. He was very instrumental in it, Pete Lemon. And this documentary did go out to all the high schools in the United States. And unfortunately, time, things get put on the shelf. But for a while, people were letting us know that they really appreciate it. Put Pueblo, the Medal of Honor recipients love Pueblo. From that convention in 2000, and they came back in 2004 when Ross Perot made that contribution to this, and we dedicated the statues. And then again in 2017, when we ran out of options for a convention, Paulette and Jim Stewart, I don't think they really raised their hand. I think I made the phone call, but they thought about it for about 5 minutes and said, yes, we'll do it. The recipients love us, and it's because we're a team, that we're a family town, we're small, and we're going to bring them back. Brad, we're going to bring them back in July.
Yep. So
the point I want to make here is that that things that are worth doing, right? And my hat's off to you and your crew for putting this together, because the Medal of Honor, before, when I received the Medal of Honor in 1969, in the military they knew what it was, but a lot of people didn't. And we put it out in the communities, and now the communities realize what it means. And again, I've already said this once. It's not so much what we did individually, but it gives us a platform to represent all of the other sacrifices that all have made. And the center is the showpiece for that. It's a natural. So the Beyond the Medal, probably the greatest result of the Beyond the Medal is it just segued right into the Center for American Values. It's a natural. And people talk about us now. The recipients, I just talked to some in Washington, D.C. They're back there now celebrating Medal of Honor Day. As I said, I choose to be here in the community, and several other recipients realize the importance of that. So we got to get into this. But the one thing that I do want to remember, and have everybody here remember, it's not about me. I just happen to be the last one standing. There were 4 of us. And the unique thing about Pueblo is there were 4 recipients alive at one time. And when you think about how rare the medal is, and the fact that it was more than half the medals, 2,000 of the 3,500 were awarded in the Civil War, when Pueblo wasn't even around much. It might have been a fort on the riverbank somewhere. But you talk about cities, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, all that, that's where the populations were. And they can't brag about the fact. Not polite to brag, but I'll brag about Pueblo and that. And it's nothing about the water. It's about the hardworking people of the town that create the willingness to make sacrifices for each other.
Great. Hey, I will note, you had a sunburn. I had hair. So I lost all my hair on the project. Okay, so we're moving on. So Bill Crawford, we're going kind of in order of oldest to youngest. You have anything for Bill, or do you want to watch the clip first?
Well, I'm gonna say something about Bill. When I was can you imagine being a young guy, 25 years old, joined the Medal of Honor Society? And in Pueblo, I delivered papers on Jerry Murphy Road. I heard about Bill Crawford, Carl Sitter, but I didn't have any idea what this was all about. And when I became a recipient and met all of my, quote, friends in Washington, D.C. in 1969, because if you were invited to all the inaugurals, and it happened to be Nixon's inauguration, so we were all there. And I saw Crawford, Bill Crawford, Carl Sitter, and Jerry Murphy for the first time. And I'm thinking, wow, there's a face to those names of that very long street I used to pedal bicycles, delivering papers uphill both ways and all that stuff. But Bill was a gentleman, very quiet, and that's his whole story when he was a janitor at the Air Force Academy. He's a quiet person, and somebody finally recognized who he might have been. He would never say a cross word about anyone. Quite a gentleman, and the other three guys were too. And to be included into that group was a very special honor when you're a young man at 25. They might have been that young when they received the medal, but they're now legends. They're old guys, and I'm brought right into it. So let's see what you got on Bill, but there's never enough because he was a fine man.
Yep. Here we go. Oh, I got to hit it again. Sorry.
You got to do something, Brad.
Yeah.
I was just sitting down the hall here in my room as a cadet. My roommate was studying, and I was reading this story about the march up the Italian boot and the tough time that the American military, the GIs were having as they pressed down or up the peninsula. And I came across the name Bill Crawford. At first, it didn't dawn on me, and then it got into the part about the Medal of Honor, and I went back and I read it again, and the name. There was something there, but I wasn't catching it. And then finally it dawned on me. And I remember looking over at my roommate and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I think Bill Crawford received the Medal of Honor. I think our janitor wears the Medal of Honor."
On September 13th, 1943, United States Army Private Bill Crawford was with the 36th Infantry on an assault of Hill 424 near Altavilla, Italy. At the point position, out in front and alone, the young scout encountered not just one, but three well-camouflaged enemy machine gun nests hidden in the hillside. With gunfire raging all around, Crawford dove for cover in a small ravine.
On his own initiative, he first attacked one of the machine gun emplacements, then turned to attack the second.
When the dust settled, Crawford had single-handedly wiped out all three of the enemy positions. He destroyed their guns and crew, allowing his previously pinned company to advance. The courageous effort earned Crawford the Medal of Honor.
I was astounded at the bravery. My God, the courage that he displayed and the level-headedness and the manner in which he went about it.
You could tell by his action that he was selfless in the way that he conducted himself, but that's the way he conducted himself in his entire life.
All right. So the janitor scene, that's Jim Stewart. Stand up, Jim. Jim Stewart played the janitor, shot at East High School in the old hallway. You did good.
I swing a mean mop.
You did really good. You did good. So again, another just
we all
tidbit.
got hidden talents, don't we?
But so that Colonel Moshgot had written the janitor's 10 lessons in leadership, and he's got a paper out, and we use it in some of our curriculum here at the center. But it's a very interesting story of how they learned that he was their janitor, and he wore the Medal of Honor because he was that kind of guy. He was humble. He doesn't talk. You know, he just wanted to be around the cadets. He didn't need the job, I don't suspect. He just wanted to be there, and so that was always an interesting piece of his story.
Were you going to mention the fact that he was presented by Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, it comes up here in a second.
Okay.
We're gonna show a little bit of that. This is his statue that's out there at or monument, I should call it. I learned again from Dave Durham, who was the sculptor, that monumental is 8 feet and statue is life size. So when you see a little thing, that's a statue. When you see a big old thing, that's a monument. So these are monumental. There is a piece on our film, a bonus feature on our disc set called Forged from Fire, and it's the making of the statues and kind of their poses and how the artist depicted each pose. And it's interesting. It's about 8 minutes. It's worth watching at some point. So we'll guide you guys to how you can get the clips at some point and see some of that stuff. But I don't have much to say about his pose at this moment. But he had the bayonet fastened. He was a scout, and obviously his action. He was a private, and he had to attack that hill, and he encountered those 3 Nazi emplacements. His story doesn't end there, though, because his story gets a little. That's what he did there in the Medal of Honor. But there's some other things here that we'll get into.
I was going to fall in behind him, and I saw one of my buddies and the squad leader laying behind a big pine tree pretty close to this little ditch that I'd occupied, and a machine gun was peppering that tree real hard from the area where we'd taken those prisoners. One of the guys had been shot right through the stomach and just missed his vertebrae in his back. We had sulfa powder in our little first aid kits, doused that on his wounds. He was blood from his waist on down. Trying to get him stop bleeding, I put a bandage on him and everything. And we heard a bunch of German talk coming from that area. Crawled down the ditch, and sure enough, here come a whole company of Germans spread out, coming up that area. One with a machine gun, they could pick up their machine guns, they had bipods on them. And he was looking down at my gas mask, studying my equipment, and he was only 30 yards at the most, and I thought, boy, here's another machine gunner, I'm going to get him. And I had his head in my sight and couldn't have missed, but something just wouldn't let me pull the trigger. Something just said, don't do it, don't do it. And I didn't pull the trigger. All of them went by us, but that guy with that machine gun, he was scanning the ditch real close and saw my tracks in there, crawling around in there. So he looked, there he saw us. He said, Hans up, and they all come storming around us with their rifles, snorting and hollering.
Back home, Crawford's family was informed he was missing in action.
So he got captured, became a POW, 13 months. Bill was a POW in a Nazi camp, and he tells the story about they walked from Italy by Mount Vesuvius, and then they got on some trains. They ended up way north. But there's this next clip that we're going to watch. While he was in POW camp, he, as a kid, he was a boxer. He was a Golden Gloves champ. And he had to square off against a Nazi guard. And that's the clip we're going to watch. You have anything about the getting captured on that scene? You want to talk about that, or should we roll this clip and then we can?
Well, go ahead and roll that one.
Okay, I'll roll this one. This was shot at my Uncle Sal Elizondo's barn in the county. So I didn't venture too far out. I was on a budget, so we had to utilize what we had.
When he was young, he decided that he wanted to learn how to box to defend himself. From there, he became a Golden Gloves champ. And that came in handy during one of the occasions when he was a POW. There was one guard always berating the U.S. prisoners. The Nazi guards didn't like him. The prisoners didn't like him. And he was always barking orders. One evening, this Nazi found Bill walking out in the yard, and he went over and told Bill that he needed to go back into his hooch. And Bill refused to go. Well, the Nazi started barking at him like he usually did. Only this time, the Nazi decided he was going to pick a fight with Bill. And he picked a fight with the wrong guy. Because remember, Bill was Golden Gloves champ. And to say the least, Bill turned around and beat the living heck out of this guy.
So I'm sure you've heard that story before. You have any insight on that?
Well, the only thing I'd like to emphasize is he was such a mild-mannered guy, and to be able to do all that on the battlefield and to face that guard, it's something that everyone has it in them to do it if they have to do it. And Bill is an example of that. So I think you've gave the proper tribute to our friend.
Well, the end of that story is that they had a little trial, and the other guards vouched for Bill, believe it or not, and the Nazi guard got reprimanded, and Bill didn't get in any trouble, because he could have, who knows what could have happened, but that's how bad that guard was, that even his own guys didn't like him. So then we've got this. You can tell us a little bit about what you know about this, and then we've got a clip too that'll kind of.
Yeah, well, Bill, when he was missing in action, he had already earned the Medal of Honor. The medal was presented posthumous to his family, mother, I believe, and President Reagan got wind of that, and because the Medal of Honor is supposed to be awarded by the president, he said, "I want to award the Medal of Honor to him."
And I think that those guys, the guy that had written the Janitor's 10 Lessons, this was their commencement. So there was a little bit of a thing to get Reagan, because he was given the commencement speech at graduation, to bring Bill to the Air Force Academy commencement, and this is what you see.
Because Crawford was captured and became a POW immediately after his Medal of Honor action, he never was officially presented the medal by the President of the United States. It was not until 1984, over 40 years after the fact, at the Air Force Academy graduation ceremonies, Bill Crawford received his official recognition. President Ronald Reagan honored Crawford by hanging the Medal of Honor around his neck, a final tribute to an unassuming, all-American hero.
We're graced with the company of a man who believed so much in the values of our nation that he went above and beyond the call of duty in defending them.
For Bill Crawford to be able to stand before President Reagan and receive the Medal of Honor after 45 years is one of the greatest moments in his life.
So that kind of speaks for itself. This is his portrait of valor that hangs in here, and you can kind of read his quote there. That's about all we got on Bill for today. There's a lot more to it. If you watch the documentary, you can learn a lot more about his life and things. Brings us to Carl Sitter. Carl was a Marine, and he's the second that we're going to talk about today. You can kind of read a little bit about him there. His action was in Korea, and we'll watch a little story brief about him really quick.
Laying down in a foxhole, and your foxhole buddy raises his head and gets hit in the head and half of it blown off. You really then realize that just how short our lifespan is and just how fragile we as human beings are. When you give your life for your fellow man and your fellow Marine, that is one of the most courageous things that you could do.
In 1950, United States Marine Corps Captain Carl Sitter received orders to take and hold East Hill at the Chosin Reservoir. Carl Sitter gathered his troops and led the way up the steep, frozen hillside. They came under blistering enemy fire and sustained heavy casualties. When the enemy launched repeated, vicious counterattacks, Sitter somehow dodged enemy fire as he found his way to each position held by his troops, spreading encouragement and demanding they hold ground at all costs.
He inspired us that he knew what he was doing, and as he said, as long as we keep fighting together, we're going to make it all right. We did.
Wounded and fighting off pain, he refused to be evacuated and continued to battle alongside his men. These heroic actions earned Sitter the Medal of Honor.
So Carl. Tell us a little bit about
Carl, and I also know cold weather. And I'm going to tell you, to fight in cold weather under those conditions, poorly equipped, because they went over not equipped properly for that, and 40 below zero, and it took great leadership. Not only the courage to stand up in front of the enemy and but the courage in reinforcing the teamwork and sticking together. And he deserved that Medal of Honor in many different ways. Those of you that have spent some time in the cold know what it's like. It's numbing. It makes you become a victim really fast. And the skill and the courage that he demonstrated to get people to come out of that victimization of the feeling is very admirable. So my hat's off to to Carl. And the other thing is when he finally retired after many years, and he went to the seminary and was dedicated to that work. Never got a chance to practice his preaching, but he went to Bill's, this is a little bit of irony here, though, went to Bill's funeral in the Air Force Academy in the winter. It was cold, probably not as cold as it was at Chozon, but he caught pneumonia, and that's what caused him to pass a few months later.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. And when you see the interviews, the Bill Crawford interview I had to acquire, and before the convention committee, they had hired a local marketing person, Glenn Ballantyne, who I was able to, the Paulette's group or the Rawlings group had hired Ballantyne to film the recipients, and so I was able to acquire those interviews, and that's the only interview I had of Bill. That's why his looks a little different. Carl's interview, he had just sat for a documentary called Korean War Stories, and they only used a little bit of his interview in that Korean War Stories, and I was able to acquire the whole interview and then use it in his story. So otherwise we wouldn't have had those two interviews. And then of course I shot Jerry's and Drew's. But they both, Pete said, let's make a documentary, and then boom, right away within 60 days, we had lost two.
Well, that's why it's important for guys like Brad to do what they do and interview people when they're alive, because you have the history there and you can create something. When they're not around, you have to piece it all together, yep. And it's a lot different. But this was history, and you did a great job in what you had to do it with.
Well, thank you. The other thing is, back then, when you'd get footage from you'd have to get footage from the National Archive, and you see all that footage, that war footage, that was real footage from the Chosin Reservoir. There was plenty of things going on up there. I'm not saying that was Carl's group. There's one shot, I swear to God, it's Carl walking through the scene. But that was Chosin Reservoir. For Drew's, the footage is very close. It was during the Tet Offensive. It was a little different battle because there was no cameras where Drew was. But and the World War II stuff with Bill, we had a gal that would go to the National Archive. They would actually rent the films, the reel-to-reels, and then it was free, but you had to pay to get it transferred. So she had the access. She could check out the films, take the films to a local place in D.C. to transfer them. And they transferred the films, and we asked for stuff within the time frame, 1943, whatever, and that was the process. But we ended up with some great footage that helps tell these stories, as well as pictures and things. I remember Jerry Murphy, when we said, hey, we want to make a documentary, he said, I don't want to do it. We heard a lot of recipients are getting ripped off of their photos because everybody was making documentaries back when we started, and the recipients were hesitant because they had horror stories of losing their memorabilia and things to guys like me. But we were able to win him. I told him I live on Jerry Murphy Street, so we're good. And then it was good because I did have a house on Jerry Murphy. So this is the Carl Sitter. We're going to look at something, but we named all the documentaries. We called Bill the Fighter. This was not as original. We called Carl the Captain, he was a captain, and we called Jerry the Lieutenant, he was a lieutenant, and we called Drew the Green Beret. But so two things in this picture before I run this clip. One, the picture up there is Carl with a .45 over his heart, which is important to later in this story, and you'll hear a little clip about that, but notate the picture. And then this is my cousin Eric Kokenberger, who played the young Carl Sitter. That's Mineral Palace, and we filmed this scene, but when you see his scene, you'll see some ties that'll tie in later to what, the significance of the red tie and the significance of him leaving church, actually. So here we go.
Carl Sitter grew up in the hardest of times, the Depression years. His dad toiled in the steel mills to put food on the table, and on Sundays he would attend church with his family. But it was on the streets of his rough South Side neighborhood that Sitter's leadership skills took hold. These were the skills he would depend on later to save the lives of fellow Marines.
It's a quick little scene depicting his leadership, that he was always out in front. This next scene will tie into the red. Well, I don't know if that's actually the case. That'll actually tie into the 45. But I'm going to run this clip, then we can kind of talk about this, okay? So Carl was on Guam in the World War II first, before he went to Korea, and he earned a Silver Star in a battle. I think that's what we're about to hear.
Carl Sitter, found his niche in the Marine Corps, went on to serve in World War II in the Pacific. Serving on Guam, he found himself in a firefight at one point, and as he rose up to peer over the small embankment he was using for protection, he was shot, and he felt the slam of the bullet into his chest and slumped back down to the ground, and kind of thought in that fraction of a moment, well, I'm dead, it's over. And pretty soon he realized he was still breathing and reached up, and his chest hurt a little bit, and as he ran his hand across it, he could feel cold steel and wet blood. See, he'd always carried a .45 holstered right here on the left side, which just happened to be over his heart. And the enemy round had hit that pistol, saving his life. And so it became Carl Sitter's rabbit's foot.
It's kind of an interesting tidbit, but he wore that. He always wore that weapon over his heart from then on, and certainly there's pictures of him later at the Chosen, and that gun's right there, which I always found that very interesting. So there he is with President Truman, and he says in the interview that exact quote. He said that Truman actually told him that quote. That quote is on the front of our quotes book, and a very pointed quote about the Medal of Honor, but Carl was presented by Harry Truman, and I think we got a little snippet out of his presentation there. Do you have anything about the 45, or you want to move on to this?
Let's move on
All right.
this one.
I was a major stationed down at Quantico, and I received a call from the commanding general to report to his office immediately. Well, as a small major, you don't go to the commanding general's office unless 99 times out of 100 there's something wrong. So I arrived and was given a cup of coffee and told to sit down. I was really treated grand, and I couldn't understand it. The commanding general walked in and said, "Major, 10 days from today, you will receive the Medal of Honor from the President, Harry Truman." Took my breath away. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe the action of what I did would rate the Medal of Honor. I didn't think I'd done anything to receive it. It was a great honor, and realizing that many people contributed to it. President Truman, he draped it around my neck and said that he'd rather have the Medal of Honor and be President of the United States. There, you hear that, but that's true.
I forgot I had it in the film. I didn't need to talk about it. So I don't know if I have a clip. So that you see the scarf he has on. What he did is he cut a piece of red parachute, and he wrapped it around his neck in the Chosen, so his men could know who he was when he was running around, because it was a lot of times elements and dark. And so the significance of Eric's tie was that he was leading with that red tie, and so that was kind of our kind of tribute and the artsy part of it, Drew. We had a little art in us at the time. Maybe not as much as Durham, because Durham's depicted all of that stuff in his statue poses. You'll notice the big mittens and things, because it was so freezing up at the Chosen. I'm going to skip the next clip. So if you want to wrap up Carl, we're probably done with Carl's part of this because I have his funeral, but we don't need to watch that.
Oh, I just want to.
So that's Carl's quote. You can read Carl's quote. You notice in his portrait, Nick Del Calzo, who took all these photos, there was always a meaning to the pose. And in Carl's, you see that he's with his statue. Same with Bill, he's with his statue. But you see Carl holding the Bible. Carl was studying was in college actually at 76 years old. He went to college, and he went to see a professor at this seminary school, and he said, or not a professor, he went to see the dean, and he said, hey, I'd like to I'd like to come to school. And they go, oh yeah, you can audit courses anytime, being an older guy, you can audit our course. He goes, no, I want to get my degree. And that's the type of guy Carl was. He wanted to get his degree. So he started a 4-year path to get his degree. He was in his 4th year, in the spring of his 4th year when he died. And they gave him the honorary degree. But in the documentary, we have we filmed those people that were working at the school and just talking about what kind of guy he was. And he had mentored there was these 3 girls he called the 3 amigos, and they did interviews with us. They were 22-year-old girls at the time. And just talking about how much he was a leader and how he would inspire them to study and do things. And so he was that guy his whole life. All right, Jerry Murphy, our buddy. We'll run his little story brief because we've got plenty of experience with Jerry and how the center was born.
Yeah, I think Jerry, in a unique way, got the center going. So think about it. We had 4 recipients, 2 had passed. Jerry was on his way out. He wasn't doing well. He was in a nursing home and had some dementia going on. It just wasn't pleasant. And the last time Brad and I went to visit him, it was a bit emotional to see him from the previous time to where he was at that moment. So we stopped at this Irish pub on Jerry Murphy Road to have a couple of Guinnesses or something in his honor.
Andy Max.
And maybe to wind down a little bit. And at that time we said, we've got to do something to memorialize these other guys, that the young people, because, let's face it, you don't know them unless it's put in your face. And unless you're driving up and down the road, you want to know who that guy is. And I personally saw a side that I wanted to share with all the young people around. So we, I don't know how many Guinnesses we had. It wasn't that many, but we had enough to get this thing going. And I don't know if we drove right from there to here. And this building was Rudy knows how bad it was. Bernie knows. It wasn't much of a building left. And we walked in there and said, we want to put the Center for American Values down there. And I don't know if Rudy asked what that was, but he said, okay, what floor do you want? And we said, well, you can have any floor you want. Well, we want it downstairs. Well, there's no floor here. We're in the dirt. These columns here were the supports for the building. And we said it'd be nice to have it open up to the Riverwalk. And turned out real good. He said, well, there's no place for windows. Well, we don't need windows because we were going to put all these portraits here. And so I think it took Rudy a long time to decide, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, got the phone call, said, you got it. So I don't know what it took to get this thing going, but it had to be, because his eyes crossed when we asked about it. But he did it. And so here we are. So 15 years of people walking through this gallery here wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't have been for what you agreed to do, Rudy.
Yeah. So before we get into Jerry's story, we have a couple of Jerry's relatives here. Bobby Valentine in the back there. I see you, Bobby. I played basketball with you this morning. You're not the athlete that your cousin was, but Bob Valentine and his wife, Marianne, stand up. Marianne's first cousin is Jerry Murphy's. Give her a round of applause. Oh, and name? Huh? Mr. Baum. Good to have you. All right. So 2 first cousins of Jerry Murphy. And Bobby, who did not get the athleticism.
Jerry Murphy was the extraordinary guy that lived up to his potential.
His acts of bravery in the cold of Korea are legendary.
Most beautiful thing was when Lieutenant Murphy came up to our rescue.
February 3rd, 1953 turned out to be a dangerous and bloody day. Lieutenant Raymond Jerry Murphy defied his orders in an effort to rescue Marines stranded on the Ungak Hill Mass in Korea. Amidst the chaos, Murphy stood tall, taking command of the stalled assault, and launched a major evacuation effort. In the face of relentless enemy fire, Murphy made trip after trip after trip back up the hill, focused on saving the lives of his buddies.
Lieutenant Murphy made so many trips I lost count, you know. And he kept going back and forth.
Despite being wounded several times, Murphy was firm. No Marine would be left behind. Murphy was the last man off that mountain.
Only when all had been recovered and evacuated did he allow himself to be evacuated for treatment of his own wounds.
This heroic effort earned Murphy the Medal of Honor.
So this is where that famous quote comes from. Before Drew Dix had received the Medal of Honor, the president said, "What is it in the water out there in Pueblo? You guys all turn out to be heroes." And that's kind of a mantra for the town, and we're very proud of that quote in Pueblo. And I know it means a lot to a lot of people. We do have some stuff with the president. The one thing about Jerry's action is, one interesting thing that you just didn't hear is 2 days before his action, Operation Clambake, he got orders, or no, he received the word that he could go home. And 2 days before Clambake, they'd been preparing for this Operation Clambake, which was to attack the Ungak Hill Mass. And they said, "Okay, Jerry, okay, Murphy, you can go home." And he said, and in the film, you'll see that he said, "Well, I couldn't leave my guys. You know, we've been planning this raid for weeks," and so he stayed. And then that's when they got into the problems that they had on that Ungak Hill. So I found that very compelling. Funny enough, when I was watching all 4 of the pieces, and I cried during Bill's, and my son Joe was looking back at me. And then I cried during Carl's. And then I cried during, he goes, "Are you crying again?" So I cried every single film as I watched him. I even cried on yours.
Oh, gee, I can't believe that.
But it was, it's moving when you watch it, and it was close to me, but things like that were what inspired me and stuff during the making of the film. But Jerry stayed back. But the other thing about Jerry is he was the 3rd platoon in his action, so they were on evacuation, and he defied his orders where he could have been court-martialed to take some guys up the hill to see what was going on, and it was a disaster. And so that's what's amazing about Jerry. He just knew, and he threw his guns away, and he carried guys off the hill. It's amazing if you watch the whole film, and you just say, wow. And he was an athlete. He was a big guy. He was a stud. So here's a little bit from his presidential.
We were at Springfield College. We were in the house that we were staying at, and he got the phone call, and he just happened to mention again, very characteristically, this kind of, they called me and told me I had the Medal of Honor, or something like that. He was mom. What do you mean you had the Medal of Honor?
Classmates, my buddy from what's going on? What's the phone call? And I guess the way he tells the story, I said, "Well, they're going to give me the Medal of Honor." And I never had ever thought about the Medal of Honor with anybody. And that kind of shook Krasovich up. He jumped off the top bunk. He said, "You dumb son of a bitch, you know what that is?"
First Lieutenant Raymond G. Murphy, United States Marine Corps Reserve. We view with almost incredulity the tales that we hear told in these citations. Seems impossible that human beings could stand up to the kind of punishment they receive and deliver the kind of service they have.
President Eisenhower's first year in office, naturally, you got a lot of activity when you go into the White House. All your family, and it's a big deal. You got 7 people getting a medal. You got 7 families from 7 different parts of the United States, and it's very emotional. Well, I'm very proud of it. It's very, very important to the history of the country.
So we called him the lieutenant. Very original. We were losing our creativity a little bit, huh? You got anything about any of that?
Just not too much about his action, but his life afterwards. He was totally had a career with the Veterans Administration, and when he retired, they didn't lose him. He stayed there, and he volunteered every day in Albuquerque. He moved down there and lived in Albuquerque, buried in Santa Fe. I went to the funeral. There was such a great respect for him within the community there. Especially, you wouldn't believe how many veterans were there from the New Mexico area, and some from up here came down there. But he was very well respected and lived as a proud Marine, and was proud to know him.
Yeah. So this the young kid scene with Jerry that we depicted was that's him with his buddy Jack Krasovich. This is Luke Lemon. That's Pete's son, and so he came down. He starred as the young Jerry Murphy, and Luke Lemon was quite an athlete himself. He was a lacrosse player, but played some college lacrosse. So there's a little clip here.
Born in 1930, Raymond Murphy, or Jerry as known by friends, grew up in Pueblo, Colorado in the 30s and 40s. At a young age, Murphy discovered his natural talents for sports and developed into a standout athlete at Pueblo Catholic High School. He developed a strong sense of community and the importance of family and friends, and his strict Catholic schooling was the foundation of his discipline and leadership skills. His childhood lessons of physical strength and strong mental attitude laid the groundwork for his entire life. It was these attributes he would rely on later to rescue his wounded Marines. Murphy's exceptional ability on the gridiron earned him a college scholarship. He and his best friend, Jack Krasovich, decided to attend Fort Lewis Junior College together. Later, they completed their 4-year degrees at Adams State College in Alamosa. It's a friendship that has lasted a lifetime.
We knew each other since we were youngsters. We went through the same schools. We were teammates in high school. We had the same kind of upbringing with our parochial background and our church and being altar boys. People talk about discipline, and that's the first thing they learned in the Marine Corps. I think we already went through boot camp. We went through almost 12 years of parochial school, and we had tremendous discipline, and that's a credit to the nuns to be able to control the situation and not let you get out of hand. And in addition to that, don't forget, we learned that we had a very good background with our home.
So this is Jerry's statue, forged from fire. The piece, again, that I talked about in the documentary. There might be a clip that later that we're going to see a little bit of them from Dave Durham making the statues. But and then there's Jerry's quote and his portrait of valor, which are the 4 at the front, as you guys know. That's our Pueblo 4, as we like to refer to them. Medal of Honor Plaza. So I'm going to ask you a question about, tell us the story about the night when you looked out the window. In 2000, the recipients were in town, and the statues were to be unveiled. And Dave Durham was coming in hot, so to speak. He's the sculptor. And tell us a little bit about what you saw out your window when you're in the Marriott and you look down at where the statues are supposed to be.
Well, you know, it's a convention, so there's a little bit of carrying on. We're having a good time, and And about 1 o'clock in the morning, I went upstairs and looked out my room, and it was overlooking the plaza over there, and I didn't see anything. And I went to bed. I said, this is going to be a bust. They aren't going to show up. There is no way. This was pushing 2 o'clock in the morning, and sun comes up. I don't know what, the sun comes up about 6 or something. It's not going to happen. And so I went to bed and looked out, and there they were, like they'd been there all night.
So I was at Durham's Foundry, which was down on the east side, when this was all happening, and it was like we were filming. John Shimus and I kept looking at Dave, and he was putting Pantene, and I go, hey, are you going to get these up? And I kept asking him, because we were trying to document them. We were going to film them being installed. And he goes, Brad, they'll never remember how late it was. They'll only remember how great it is. And that's what he told me. And you know what? He was right. He was right. I invited him today, but he's down. He's been in California or something right now. But this is a little clip out of, and you get a little taste of Dave.
I've tried to portray these guys at certain different times during their action. For example, Crawford, he's portrayed like prior to his action. The idea I had for Carl was that he's portrayed in the middle of his action. Jerry is portrayed kind of after his action. And Drew is being portrayed kind of like during, kind of in the midst of his action also. So I tried to kind of get...
Those were the crane shots the night when he's looking at, when he was already in bed, I guess, because that's when they started coming in. But it was early in the morning when he finally got him in. But it happened. Paulette, were you nervous?
Oh, not at all.
This is a picture of the boys in front of the display inside the convention center during this time back in the day. Drew, you were my age then. My age now.
Man, I can't believe it.
So here we go. We're into Drew's piece here. Drew said, "Don't do anything on my action," yada yada yada. And so we kind of listened, but we've got a couple of things in here that we want you to watch, and I'm sure Drew can talk to us about it. But I'm going to let it go. Unless you got anything to say about this guy.
I ain't got nothing to say about this guy.
All right. Well, here we go.
If you had two more like him, you could march into hell and put the fire out. I can honestly say Drew Dix is one of the few people I've ever seen that had no concept of fear, none whatsoever.
In 1967, Green Beret Drew Dix was assigned to the Central Intelligence Agency.
Drew Dix was involved in some very hairy, clandestine type operations in Vietnam, many of which I'm sure Drew can't talk about.
As the lone American, Dix led Chinese, Cambodian, and Vietnamese mercenaries in unconventional operations.
Some soldiers, go to fight, they little bit scared,
During the Tet Offensive of 1968, Dix led a small contingent of troops in a harrowing 56-hour battle with 2 Viet Cong battalions.
I thought it was a kiss-off situation as far as I was concerned.
I knew there wouldn't be much support. I didn't realize there'd be no support.
The action earned Dix the Medal of Honor.
President Johnson was the president that awarded me the Medal of Honor. It was the last official act that he did in office. Very proud time for me to bring my family there to witness that. I was still in a fog, and if I didn't have a video of that ceremony, I might not remember much about it.
I see you were whispering something in the president's ear. You want to tell us about that?
Well, he was actually whispering something in my ear, and I know I won't tell you what he said. I will tell you this. there's rumors about him being a kind of a crusty guy, would say what was on his mind, and that's true. He did. I won't repeat it.
Good enough. So our next slide here is the young Drew Dix, who was portrayed by Josh Mosier, son of our friend Mike Rumpf, and it was shot at my uncle and aunt's ranch, my Aunt Rose, my dad's sister, shot at their ranch in Rye, Colorado. We got a couple of scenes out of that. You were there that day?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
Drew Dix grew up in the foothills of Colorado, in the small steel town of Pueblo. At an early age, he developed a strong sense of right from wrong.
Whatever he did right. Drew was very active in everything. He loved everything. He loved the bugs and the hunting. He had a wonderful father. And of course, he was in the service and retired from the service.
I thought a lot of my father, and I thought he, was doing an important job. And when you're growing up, if those things stick with you, it's what you remember.
He was at ease. He was in his element when he was in the outdoors. And I think that carried him through his success in Vietnam, and being comfortable in the environment, but also in leading his troops.
Little shot of the statues there. And let me see. I can't remember exactly. I had another couple clips here. Let's just see what. Let's click through. You don't have anything about that?
Well, the thing that I want to say, we were talking about the statues, and is worth saying is when I received a call from Bob Rawlins, said, "Hey, we want to put a statue up in Pueblo," and I don't want a statue. That's kind of. I just wasn't into that stuff, but it was very, very pointed, very clear when he said, it's not about you. It's the fact there's 4 of you. So I want to say that that sunk in right there, that the fact that there's 4 of us, and I was part of that 4, it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add, on Drew's pose, you notice he doesn't have conventional outfit on.
Brad, Bob Rollins was kind of a smart guy, and I said, I'll make a deal with you, Mr. Rollins. I said, as long as it's authentic, the statue is a realistic, authentic. He said, I'm with you on that. They did a statue or a bust on me, and it wasn't even like me, and it was terrible. And so I sent him a photograph of me, and sure enough, it had the Buntline Ruger 357 and Swedish K and all that, and so when they decided to do the statues, that's what it was going to be. And I said, well, I appreciate it, but it's going to be representing Vietnam, and all these guys that fought in Vietnam, their kids are going to say, well, what weapon is that? Is that how it was? And he again told me, he says, that's the way it was, and you wanted it to be authentic, and that's the way it's going to be. So that's why those weapons are in there.
No helmet.
No helmet, or
Explain the significance, though, because you were on that different operation.
Well, yeah, the reason why, and actually I could have sent him a picture of someone took of me wearing black pajamas, because we went behind the lines and tried to look like the enemy as much as possible. And of course, that wouldn't have been good in a monument or a statue either. Somebody said, what is he wearing pajamas for? But no, I'm glad they picked that one. But anyway, it's authentic, and that's a photograph. It's just like a photograph in the book almost.
I bet you blended in well with the Vietnamese in your black pajamas.
Well, I tell you what, I did a little prior planning. I only picked the guys, we only went out with half a dozen guys, and I picked the tallest ones so I wouldn't look so different. But and I was in the middle of a sampan, so when you're sitting down, you're pretty much just kind of be the same height, pretty pretty much. But yeah, that was a tough part of it, is trying to blend in. And we didn't wear helmets, and so you couldn't cover up the blonde hair. So I don't know. We lucked out. There's a lot of luck in this stuff.
I think there's another clip. I can't remember what it is.
Drew Dix volunteered for the Army in 1962 at the age of 17. Initially, he was a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. At age 21, Dix began Special Forces training, and in 1966 received his Green Beret.
The motto of the Special Forces is to free the oppressed. There's two ways you free the oppressed, and neither one is defensive. Both are proactive.
Special Forces soldiers are not just special mission kind of people where they go in and blow things up and attack the enemy. They go in and organize, train, and lead indigenous forces. So in doing that, you should be language qualified. You have to know a lot about politics of the community, the cultural differences. There's a lot to it.
Drew is a shining example of someone who trained with the best. The minute he showed up, it was like he was a combat veteran from many years before. And it made a firm believer out of me that a proper training with a proper attitude and individual, you can hit the ground running. And that's exactly what he did.
In 1967, Dix was sent to Vietnam.
So the significance of me showing you that was that we licensed a song from the Rolling Stones. And that was quite the process, you know. So I had to write a check to Mick Jagger and Keith Richards for $10,000 or something. I think it was, I remember it was $5,000 to the songwriter and songwriters, which was those two guys, and $5,000 to the band, something like that. But that was fun. That was Frank's idea to license the song, and we felt, and I had some other ones picked out, and Frank, being the DJ, KDZA days, said, no, give me Shelter, Rolling Stones. So that's what we used. There's a couple other clips that I think help to talk about Drew's story that I wanted to run through really quick. This is Drew with some pictures with the PRUs, the Provincial Reconnaissance Unit, which were the indigenous troops that he led. And then Nago, who you saw earlier, was a Chinese Nung who was like bodyguards. The Nungs were bodyguards for Drew, but they weren't PRUs. They were another indigenous group, yeah?
Well, we hired the best to do the job. They were all under that unit. And we used the Chinese. Actually, we picked the indigenous that were coming from the area where they spoke the language, the Cambodians. And when we went to Cambodia and Vietnam, and then there were some Chinese communities. And so it was helpful to have somebody who could speak the language like a native. Because, you know, I'm not a natural linguist. And I just finished total immersion Spanish, and I immediately went to Vietnam. So, you know, that's the way the Army works. But and so the Spanish didn't help me a lot.
I met the Jew at 1967. Jew are very, very good people. All time we go to fight, go together. You know. One time we go to Tung Lu Kit at night time. Vietnam people, they talk. Jew, he don't know that Vietnam. I know. Jew take care of me, I take care of Jew. You know, just go to the war, just, you know, like that. Hey, Jew, not sleep tonight. I say, what? I said, not sleep. I take the 9mm, I put my head sleep. I look in the, like that, look at the people, you know. Yeah. He come, ready to kill.
I found that very pointed because you worked with the indigenous troops, but you guys were brothers, and you had your life in his hands, and he was watching over you while you slept, and you probably did the same for him.
Oh, absolutely. And there's one thing there where you said he knows Vietnam. He didn't speak Vietnamese. He spoke Chinese. That's a couple times that could have been embarrassment because he didn't know any more Vietnamese than I did. But I could tell you a couple stories about that someday, but for a different time.
So we got a little clip. Drew, you'll tell us who the gunfighter is. Or, well, you know what? Actually, run the clip and then you talk about it again, okay?
That probably explain it.
Yeah.
Throughout his military career, Drew Dix served with and under many of the military's most decorated soldiers, including 3-star General Hank Emerson. As a combat veteran of the Korean War and later in Vietnam, Emerson earned the nickname the Gunfighter. Emerson has received 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, an award second only to the Medal of Honor, 5 Silver Stars, and many others. After his first tour of duty in Vietnam, Drew Dix worked as an aide to Emerson. Another notable soldier under Emerson's direct command was General Colin Powell. On a recent winter day in Montana, the gunfighter was kind enough to share his thoughts on Drew Dix.
Now, this is economy of force in the best sense of the word. People like to say, rightly so, in the special operations community, this is force multiplier. This is saying one individual with a few indigenous forces, he's multiplied the force, but we've only committed 1 American, but he's equivalent of the size of an American unit. And so that made these very efficient operations.
So I found that to be pointed for up to Nago there. You can talk about a little bit about what he's talking about there, but also just the gunfighter in general.
Well, the gunfighter was a soldier general. And, Patricia, my wife, didn't know much about the military, but I would like to say this, that we visited him a few times. I visited him several times in his place in Montana. There was not a single night that he didn't get a call from one of his soldiers from Korea or Vietnam. Not one night that we met, and he talked with them for a long time. And he cared about them. He called them the little guy. And he meant it affectionately, little as if they didn't have a lot of voice. But he was a wonderful man, and we need him like him now. Because it's leadership that is so important when you're willing to, or you have to commit young men and women now into combat. You need to have those that can look out for them for their interests, not just for their self-interest. And I'll tell you what, there's some gunfighter stories. You know, he got that name for landing a helicopter, and when a helicopter, another one shot down, and the enemy were attacking, he pulled out .45 and started going up against automatic weapons. And then later in that same battle, or the battle was a couple weeks long, he got shot down. And I didn't know him at that time, but when he came to Fort Bragg, and he was recovering from those burns, he wanted somebody to be his aide to show him the ropes in Special Forces, because he was in charge of all Special Forces. One general officer in those days ran all of Special Forces, one. And that was the gunfighter. And Brad, I'll tell you what, he didn't pull any punches. And when Brad brought his John to shoot the film in Montana, he didn't pull any punches.
He was a little hard on
like it was.
He was hard on John. John was because John was in the Army, so he beat John up pretty good.
Yeah.
That was fun. We went to Montana. The other story was when we finished the documentary, I told Drew, I said, hey, I've got the first cut done. Okay, come to Alaska. I'm like, this guy, right? So
the Homeland Security guy couldn't leave.
Yeah, that's true. so he invites me to Alaska to show him the film. I've got a VHS tape, because this was all tape and stuff. So pack up, we go to Alaska, get to Anchorage, we go to Jeff Badger's house, who's a friend of ours, and I didn't know Jeff at the time, and go to this house, and hey Brad, welcome to Alaska, welcome here. Would you like something to drink? I'm thinking, yeah, I'll have a beer. No, we have tequila and we have whiskey. That was it. So we had a few whiskeys, and Drew liked the film, and I got out of Dodge, so to speak, happy. Yeah. But there is one little part of your action that I know you told me no action, but wanted to show. So I'm going to show that. The phone.
We've pretty well gotten the enemy's situation consolidated, where we knew where we were, we knew where they were. But we looked down the street and we saw this flag that was flying on the flagpole in front of the province chief's house, and it had to go. And as we made our way down there, I don't know why the flag was so important to us, but it was a symbol. Flag is a big symbol, and the enemy flag was no different.
About 100 yards before we got to Major Fung's house, we ran out of those houses to give us cover, so we had to get over to the street and just go right down the street, and there was a wall about 10 inches high. I didn't know I could get behind one. But that wall went all the way to a kind of like a roundabout in front of his house that was more for decoration, with a flagpole in the middle. I took my radio off because it's sticking high up and I'm pushing it in front of me. And I could only fire my Swedish K up on laying it on the wall, because if I turned it up, they're gonna nail me for sure. The cement was stinging me in the face, and it was pretty spooky there. And one had divided my unit up, and I sent 5 across the street with the M60 machine gun to give us covering fire as the rest of us would assault Major Fung's house. I made my next move and ran across this open area, but just as I did, a VC ran out from the front door, right through the front gate, towards that flagpole where the VC flag was flying, and got right up to the bottom of it and stood there kind of defiantly, like, "You're not taking the flag down." And I kind of said, "Well, oh yes we are," but I looked back to see if my guys saw what I saw. This guy was just standing there, and he wasn't just trying to surrender. He had his weapon, and he's making a move like, "You're not taking that flag down." Well, I took him out, and we proceeded on. I pulled the flag down and stuck it in my shirt, and we ran into the front gate. I didn't want to use hand grenades because Major Fung's wife and kids may be there, and while I didn't want to hurt them for obvious reasons, I also wanted them so it might motivate him to get back in the action. Fought our way up the stairs, exchanging shots as we went up. Shot one of them, and he was hit hard, but he wasn't down. And I got to the top of the stairs, and I'll be damned if they didn't just jump out of that window. I ran over there and expected to see 2 crumpled bodies down there, but there was none. At least 2 stories high, but they had a lot of incentive to get out of there. PRUs had come in behind me, and I could hear them arguing with somebody in the back room, yelling, and he said, come out, come out. And they're just about ready to hose them down, and it was a wife and 2 children. They hadn't killed them.
That was indicative of his whole action. 56 hours of that kind of stuff. But that was a big part of this story that I think they always talk about the beginnings of this story, but that was so pointed because you were able to rescue that. You rescued a lot of people. I mean, you were very offensive in your action, but it was rescuing people. And thank you on Medal of Honor Day for doing what you did.
Well, thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
So we're going to kind of wrap this down a little bit. I got maybe one other clip that's coming, and then we can do some Q&A if you want to, and if you're still awake. But let me run it.
The Beyond the Medal stories provide only a glimpse of what truly happens on the battlefield. These 4 small-town heroes shy from the spotlight, but cannot be denied their place in history. Drew Dix and his men rescued helpless citizens. They attacked and exterminated 2 Viet Cong battalions. The Viet Cong general snagged by Dix was one of the highest-ranking officers captured during the Vietnam War. Bill Crawford became one of America's greatest World War II heroes in Alta Villa, Italy. Had he not succeeded, his company most certainly would have suffered enormous casualties. Carl Sitter's George Company was one of the last to leave Korea's infamous Chosin Reservoir area. Sitter inspired his men to ignore their impossible situation and fight to hold their ground at all costs. In what could be one of the greatest individual military rescue efforts ever, Jerry Murphy repeatedly risked his life to save his men. Without his efforts on the Eungak Hill Mass in Korea, the Marine death count would have been much, much greater.
I remember Carl Sitter, Jerry Murphy, Bill Crawford as heroes, and I wanted to be like them. Years later, I became part of that foursome. All four of us were different. We come from the same town, but we're different. That there's no mold that makes individuals do what they have to do the right thing. It's just the opportunity. I believe there's a lot of fiber in these individuals, these kids now that would do what had to be done when the time came. And we don't know what that is. It's not all combat. Whether it's your work or whether it's helping somebody across the street or putting a fire out of a building or a burning car. I mean, you do what you have to do. Any young person looking at these statues can picture themselves there. Sure, they're going to look at it. Would they do what we did? My answer to you is yes, they would. Because if they do what's right, because they'll know what it is.
All right. So that's it. That's what we've got. Tanya, thank you. Thank you. If there's any, hold on, Drew. There might be a question or two. Okay.
First, go ahead. You want to talk?
If anybody has any questions, Tanya can run the mic to you and go ahead, Tanya. Sorry.
What an incredible journey we've been on tonight. Can we give them another round of applause, please? Actually, on Medal of Honor Day, can we give Drew a standing ovation, please?
Oh, come on.
Thank you. And then a standing ovation for Brad, this director right here. I mean, Emmy Award-winning. So
thank you.
As part of the Center for American Values, we've seen this video. We've seen it. We've presented it. We've taught our students it. But seeing behind the scenes is incredible. I mean, it's really incredible. And I think Drew is right. Being here today on Medal of Honor Day in our community shows great commitment to not only the work that has been done, the sacrifices, but being here with us right here in Pueblo, Colorado, where it all began, is incredible. Thank you, Drew. And Brad, I think your parents should be very proud of you. Very proud of you. And they're here tonight. That is awesome.
Funny story about that. So we were at the Emmy Awards or whatever, and Frank Provenza leans over to my parents and goes, "You must be so proud of Brad. He must have been such a great student." And my parents looked at him like with this blank stare, like, "What are you talking about?" Rosetta, I didn't do too good later on in school after second grade, but anyway.
Awesome. Okay, do we have any questions in the audience? What questions do we have? Annie? You don't have to be shy. It's okay.
All right.
Back here?
Great question. She asked, where does someone see the documentary? We're in the process of transferring, upgrading the film to HD and stuff. So we're going to put out some correspondence, and we're going to have it available on the platforms that are out there. But we're in a little bit of a production phase getting it prepped since it's standard definition. But yeah, thank you for asking about that. We will have it ready. We are going to run it in the theaters. For the 250, we're doing a bunch of stuff in July, starting with Barney's On Values all the way through July 25th. But one of the weekends in July, we're going to have the documentary at Tinseltown. So if anybody wants to go to that, we'll put out some correspondence on that, and we're going to run the 2-hour PBS special there. That should be kind of interesting seeing it in the theater.
Other questions?
Someone ask a question. All right, good enough. There you go.
Really appreciate your listening the whole documentary because I wasn't even aware of it, and I just wanted to ask, what's the thing now that you see as these young men and women are out there with what we got going on in the world right now? What's the thing that you come back to that gives you faith in what the military is doing, especially the young military men and women that are serving?
Well, that's a very good question, very timely, and I think my experience with the military is if they understand what the mission is, and with the proper training which they have, and the pride in their unit and their love of country, they'll get the job done. And the tougher it is, the harder they're going to do it. Probably, a little bit different than in my era, because we had draftees. I went back to Vietnam with draftees, and the average age was 18 years old. They didn't know much, but they were good. And the reason why they were good is they stuck together, and that's what we do, is we stick together. And those young men and women that are doing the deed now stick together and believe in what they're doing. And that's what the leadership, it's all leadership from the top, very top down, is to convince those young men and women that what they're doing is the right thing for the right reason, and they'll be looking out for them. That means a lot. It carries a lot of weight.